Encouragement. We're so excited to share this time with you for what we call our patient interview series. It's during this time that we actually sit down with real patients and talk about their real medical illnesses and conditions that they've had, from their beginning symptoms and the problems they have physically to their journeys, going to see doctors, having tests done, as well as how they manage those conditions, as well as the long-term consequences and how they're dealing with those. It's a chance for us to explore with each of our patients how they handled some of the trials and tribulations, as being sick is absolutely one of the toughest things to have happen to you. So we'll get to share their journey, get to experience it, and I know you're going to be encouraged, you're going to be inspired by some of their stories, and especially how they were able to rely on family, friends, and their faith in order to help them know that at the end, everything was going to be okay. We thank you so much for joining us, and we're so excited for you to share with us in this series as we learn about the different types of medical conditions that our patients have had. I'm so excited to have our next guest here. This is Meek, a good friend of mine, and he is going to talk to us a little bit about his experience with a condition called Myelodysplastic syndrome. So Alan, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today and share your experience. We've had some great patient interviews that we've done, and we're so excited to share with our viewers some of the experiences. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself so we can know your background.
Okay. Alan Meek. I was a policeman in Huntington for almost 28 years. I retired from the Huntington Police Department and been retired about 6 months. I got a call from the village of Barbersville, and asked if I'd be interested in coming up and helping them out for 90 to 120 days. They were having some internal problems, and I thought about it and talked to my wife about it, and I actually talked to several people from church about it, and they said, well, you ought to do it, and I said, you can always quit. And so I told the mayor up there I would accept the position for 90 to 120 days, and end up being there almost 10 years. And it was a great experience for me. It was a growth experience for me. I got to do things a little bit differently. I was in charge of the police department, and I got to make some decisions, I think, that affected some of my employees' lives in a positive manner. I think I was a role model for the majority of the guys because of the way I treated them and what I expected out of them. And I think that was enabled me and with the work of the guys to turn the department around, and I think really get to be what we could be.
So I've known you for a long time. You're a very active guy. You're always energetic. You're always out being involved with people. So at some point, all of a sudden, or maybe in a slow fashion, something started to change. So what did you first start to notice that was different?
Well, actually, I never did notice something was different. I'm very fortunate that I go to a doctor that is very proactive, Dr. Adam Franks. Actually, he was one of my wife's former students, so we really, hit it off really well. And Adam, over a period of time, was keeping a check on my blood work and everything, and he said he wasn't comfortable with that. And he said, I want you to go to see a guy at Cabell Huntington, hematologist, and I went to see a doctor there. And he asked me, so what are you doing here? And I said, well, they tell me I'm sick. And then he looked at the chart, and it had me as being anemic. And I didn't know I was anemic. And he said, well, I think what we'll be able to do is probably just monitor you and just keep a check on you. But first, what I need to do is I need to do a bone marrow biopsy on me. And so they did a bone marrow biopsy on me. And I come back 2 weeks later. My wife and I and my daughter went in and to see the doctor. And he comes in. We're sitting in there, and he comes in, and he's looking down at the thing and shaking his head. And something's not right. And he said, I got some bad news. He said, I got to get you into either the Cleveland Clinic or Ohio State University. You're in pretty bad shape. And I think it was on a scale of 0 to 4. I was at 3.5. And he said, we're fortunate right now that you haven't developed leukemia. and he said, I want to try to get you in on one of the two places. And he called me a couple of days later and said, I got you in at Ohio State. I got a real good relationship with the gentleman up there who was the head of the program, Dr. Devine. And so my wife and I and my sister-in-law went up there to be interviewed by the doctor, Dr. Devine. There was actually two doctors interviewed us for approximately 4 hours. And they told us all the good things can happen and all the bad things can happen. And they never told me, all the time we were talking, that I'd be eligible for a bone marrow transplant because of my age. That's one of the things we were concerned about. And my wife finally asked Dr. Devine, said, well, is he going to be able to have a bone marrow transplant? He said, absolutely he will. She said, I wish you'd have told us a little bit ahead of time. He said that, well, what we like to do, we like to interview people and get a little bit of history on them, sort of like we're doing here. And he said, because if you don't have a real strong support system, you won't make it. And he said, we'll be able to do that. He said, what I'll do, there are certain things you'll have to do, and you can do them at home. And I took 4 rounds of chemo here in Huntington at Cabell, and they'd send the results up to Ohio State. And Dr. Devine wanted me, and I don't understand all this, to be below a 5 on a scale on your red blood cells, I think. And the first time I thought I was going to make it after I did 2 rounds of chemo, and I really didn't feel any effects from that. And he called me back and said, it's not enough. He said, we're going to have to do 2 more rounds of chemo, and then we'll see how it goes. And then eventually, I did him at the second round, I was fine. And so I asked him, do I have to get someone to be a donor for me? He said, no, you don't worry about any of that. We'll take care of all of that. It's not an issue. We'll find them for you. And he gave me a little bit of history of how the donors started. And he said it started from the Navy. One of the commanders, one of his troops had, his wife was going to have a bone marrow transplant, and they didn't have any donors. And so actually, the military guys started volunteering to be donors for bone marrow. And I didn't know it at the time, but my nephew and niece, who were in the military, they're donors. So I started, the process up there, and I came back home, and I met with the church, and they asked me how things were going. I said, well, let me tell you what was really neat. The doctor I'm seeing, his name is Devine. And I said, that's sort of ironic. And I asked Dr. Devine, I said, do you believe in prayer? Right. And Dr. Devine says, absolutely. He said, I believe in all the help I can get. And that was reassuring for us, because I know he was sincere, and as I went along, I know that he was sincere in his thoughts. And I ended up going up there when I had my transplant. Actually, I was supposed to go in March, and my donor that was going to be my donor, something happened, and I think he got deployed. I think I got a man. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he got deployed, and then they had another person that met all the criteria, and I know it was a female, and something happened, and she backed out. So that was a little bit disheartening, because I was all ready and pumped and ready to go. Right. And actually, the neighborhood kids who live in our area where we live knew that it was my birthday and knew that I'd had some bad luck. So they came out in front of my house, our house, and it was like 7 or 8 of the kids, and they videotaped. They sang happy birthday to me. Yeah. And I got that. Wow. And so that makes you feel good. Yeah. That the neighborhood. Now, I really was fortunate when Dr. Devine and the other doctor was interviewing me, that I wasn't only telling him about my immediate family, I told him about my church family. Right. And he said, you really have a strong support system, which is really, really important, and when you're battling something like this. And I'm lucky enough to have my wife and my sister-in-law. They stayed on me big time. Right. After I got to leave, I was in a hospital for 24 days. We had to live up there for almost a month, because I had to go back and forth quite a bit. But there's times when I was in a hospital. I was in the hospital 24. The 7th day I was in the hospital is when they did the transplant.
Right.
And that's when I don't remember a whole lot because they told me how sick I was, and they had to pack me on ice a couple of times because my temperature, and you lose control of your body functions, and I remember some of that, and it wasn't very pleasant, and it was a little bit embarrassing. And but the people up here at the hospital said, we knew exactly what was going to happen. You're not the first person to go through this.
Right.
We anticipated this,
Right.
and we were ready for it.
Right.
So that was, they really very, very, very fortunate that I got to go up there at Ohio State and have the medical staff that I had, and the way they treated us is just unreal. And my church family is the same way. I had a lot of people that were praying for me, and I could feel that. And it's frustrating at times, Aaron. I know, I know where I'm going. I don't want to go right now, and I guess the same. I'd like to be around a little bit, and I always said, if I could just see my oldest granddaughter get married, and I would be okay.
Yeah.
And she's only 13 years old.
Right.
And when I've tried to be a good person. I don't treat anybody bad. I try to help people, and I wonder why it happened to me. And then you may remember Mike Perry. They asked Mike Perry, "Why do you think you got this?" And he said, "Why not me?" Mm-hmm. And it challenges you at times, and you wonder why, and you get a little discouraged, and then I always see someone else that's got a lot more going against them than I do. I still got to be careful. I had pneumonia about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and my immune system is not what yours is right now. And hopefully it'll eventually get stronger. Mm-hmm. The doctors up here told me it'll never be what you were, but it'll get better.
Right.
And I take medication for my immune system now because it's not so great. And he said, where most people would get a cold or something like that, to be over in a couple of weeks, it may take you twice that long.
Right. And
so, and I'm used to hitting it pretty good, and I can't do what I used to do.
Right.
But I'm thankful to be where I am.
Yeah, I think there's so many important points in what you've talked to us about. I mean, one for sure is you really didn't know you were sick. No. And so I think that speaks to the importance of making sure that you get regular checkups, whether you think you need them or not.
Yeah.
And getting that. So I think that's extremely important. Number two, we need bone marrow donors. We need people to be in the bone marrow registry for people exactly like you, people who are committed to working hard, people who have huge families, people that you have lives that you want to be a part of, and it's so important to have those donors out there. And then third, that community. I mean, not only the healthcare community, but obviously your church community as well. Talk to us just a little bit about trust. What kind of trust that you have to put into the healthcare people that took care of you?
Well,
how important is that?
Oh, it's just out of this world important. We lost my doctor this past January. Dr. Devine has taken over the bone marrow research in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's the big thing, and it's really funny. We were up there for my exam and stuff, and I was kidding the people. I said, I didn't know Dr. Devine was leaving, and no one knew he knew he was leaving. And the nurse said, but I had. And then he came in. I said, I didn't know he was leaving. He said, what'd you hear? And I said, well, you're not leaving. And he said he was leaving.
Yeah.
And I was very, just a little bit discouraged from that. And he said, Alan, I have an opportunity to go someplace. I won't be seeing patients, but I'll be able to do research to save more lives.
Wow.
And he said, whoever will come in and take over will do a tremendous job.
Right.
And the guy I see now is Dr. Penza. And the first time I met him, he wasn't Dr. Devine, but you know, you're just trying to feel him out, and he was probably trying to feel me out also. And then the second time and 4 or 5 times after that, just a great guy.
Yeah.
He comes in and, like you and I were talking, he'll sit and talk to you for half an hour.
Yeah.
As long as you have questions. And believe me, my wife has questions.
Sure, absolutely.
And I'm lucky to have her
Right.
because she's got a book. She almost has a book about that
Right.
thick from the time I was diagnosed to where I'm at right now.
Right.
And even when we go out to see Adam, she can look in and tell Adam everything that's going on. And Ohio State now sends everything here to Dr. Franks, so he can see what's going on, because they did a bunch of different blood work for me, and they correspond with one another. But I've never been at a place like at Ohio State. I don't know who is in charge of their orientation for their new employees, but it's got to be tremendous.
Wonderful.
I mean, and they consider themselves a family. They don't consider themselves actually in a hospital. They said, we're a family. And he said that, and that's the only way we're successful.
Right.
And when last time I was talking to Dr. Penn, I said, I really appreciate everything you did for me. Well, he said, we didn't do anything. The man above, this is a doctor.
Which is great.
The man above is the one that he didn't say man. He said he guided us.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was just more than just them.
That's
and
right.
I'm thankful for that.
Alan, thank you so much for sharing with us. What an amazing story. It's so encouraging to hear all these things. And we're so thankful that Alan's still here to hang out with us. He's one of the greatest pranksters I know. I love him so much for that, and even my own kids. And so have had such an impact from him. A wonderful man, and wonderful messages for our online viewers. And we just thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I hope to keep you around a whole lot longer, man.